Every time I make a video, there is always a comment asking which operating system do I use or which theme do I use, for those that find out that I am actually using Linux. So if you're familiar with the Blender videos that I make on the Blender YouTube channel or on other YouTube channels, basically this is most of it, like what I show. It's just Blender basically. But for example, I do this a lot, like moving the window and then scaling it like bubblegum. And this is a feature that most of the desktop environments that are available for Linux have. Is very common to scale like this. I was actually very surprised when I found out that Windows or others didn't have it so easy, that you have to go to the corner and find this. So yeah, this is one of the main features, such a small thing, but it's one of the main features that I use all the time. I use the GNOME desktop environment, so I use Ubuntu GNOME. This is version from last year, which it was still, Ubuntu was shipping with another desktop. And in the latest one, if you download the latest 1804 by the time I make this video, it is actually GNOME comes with it by default. So you can install others if you want, but by default it has Ubuntu GNOME. So no need to download the other one anymore. On top of that, I use a theme. So you're familiar with GNOME, you can have themes. You just need to install the GNOME tweaks software that most of the time is installed, but otherwise you just install it, GNOME-tweaks. And in the tweaks, you can install extensions. One of the extensions is the user theme. And it's just a matter of enabling it, and then you can install themes on top of it. The theme that I use is called Arc theme. It's extremely popular. It has over 7,000 stars on GitHub. So yeah, it's pretty popular. It has 3 variants. The one that I use is the darker one. There's a AC or Arc Dark. And I'm actually pretty happy because everything that I throw at it, it just looks nicer. And the text and the colors has a slight tint to it. For example, I use a icon theme that is called NewMix, the NewMix project, which they are awesome. They all do all kinds of projects regarding icons and theme and yeah, all kinds of stuff. I love their work. And they make many versions as the regular icons, which are nice, flat, and colorful. And then they make the same, but in a circular version. So I like those. And it's just a matter of installing it. If you're on Ubuntu, you can just install it. It usually comes with it, ships with it. Or you can, what I do actually is use the PPA. So I have the latest one, like the development package. And like installing a repository just for icons, it's a bit crazy, but I really like this icon set. So this icon set is circular, and it covers most of the application. In this case, I have one that is called Linux Show Player that doesn't have a custom icon, but pretty much every other app has a icon for it. Then that's about it. The cursor, I don't change it. I just use the default from Ubuntu Advaita. Then as I was saying, the theme works so well with anything. For example, as a file browser, like Ubuntu, like GNOME has apps for all kinds of stuff. Has apps for the weather, for example, and it's just a built-in app for weather. It has one for maps, for example, and you can see, you can basically see a map in an app inside the laptop. Anyway, it also has Nautilus, which is a files browser, but I'm not always a fan of it. There are some things that I find not as fast as other ones that I tried. So the one that I'm using right now is not this one, not the built-in one, but it's one that's called PCman FM. Terrible name, great app. The thing is that it just looks very ugly. This is how it looks by default. Maybe the screenshot is a bit older, but yes, it doesn't get much better than this by default. But with the Arc theme, I didn't have to do anything, and it just looks so much better. I did a few changes, maybe like the size of the thumbnail, or I also hide some buttons here from the toolbar. You can hide some buttons. I made these like buttons, the path, so you can click on it, but you can do Control L to edit path, just like in regular browsers on Linux. If you're familiar with this, it's not really that much different. F4 to open a terminal, whatever you are in the folder that you are, you can open a terminal. It has all kinds of stuff, so recommended. I never have any really issues. What I like is really fast. Just what I like. Other extensions that I have are the dash2dock, which actually comes built in the latest Ubuntu. So if you download it, you probably have it. You just need to tweak it because it probably looks very ugly, like the Unity desk, like the typical Ubuntu look, which is arguably not very tasty, not very tasteful. I like things a bit more flat, so that's why I tweak mine. And with the help of the Arc theme, it just looks very nice. I didn't have to do anything. It just works. So very nice app, the dash2dock. If you don't have it on your Linux distro, you can use it. And it's very simple. It just shows the icons that you want, if you want some of them to be always there. Otherwise, the apps that you have, it will show a little rectangle under it, just to show how many of those windows do you have open. And that's about it. You can make it like sparkle when you click and fire when you delete stuff, but I don't use any of that. I just like things a bit more clean. Another theme that what other extensions that before I miss it? Pixel Saver. It's the simplest extension ever. It basically, when you have a window and you full screen it, it will remove the top, like the title, the window title, window border, and the X to close, it will put them here next to the up here next to the time and not the time, but the notification stuff. So there you can just close it and you save a few pixels, but every pixel counts. So that is one of the extensions, and the other one is the system monitor. You've probably seen it up here. It's basically a way to quickly see if my CPU is being used, how much percentage of the memory is being used, how much swap, if I'm using any, the speed of internet, speed of uploads and downloads, just to see if anything weird is going on. Maybe I'm paranoid from the times I use Windows. And then the language. I have two languages that I use, in English and Spanish, and I switch with them with a shortcut. And then basically the settings for the microphone, for the brightness of my laptop. I'm using a laptop VPN. I don't use sometimes, but it's cool to have it here at hand, my Wi-Fi. And that's pretty much it. This is all the things that I have. On the browser side, I'm using nowadays more Chrome than Firefox. I tried Firefox Quantum. I wasn't really sold yet, so I'm using Chrome with a theme that I installed like I don't know how many years ago, but I still use it up to this day and I like it. It's called Star 7. It's basically a gradient, and I like the gradient kind of space themed that it has. So very nice. I will add links in the description. Then the hardware itself, it's very common. This laptop is very popular. It's from a few years ago. It's called it's a Dell XPS 15. It has 16 gigs of RAM. It has, it has 16 gigs of RAM. It has a GTX 1050. It's an NVIDIA, and the processor is an Intel i7 7700HQ, 2.8 gigahertz, and the NVIDIA graphics card. It's more than enough for what I do usually. Of course, bigger will be nice, but for now I have this card has 4 gigs of VRAM and a bunch of CUDA cores, so I can compile Blender with CUDA support and just use it for pre-visualization stuff. It has a 512 hard drive SSD. Then which other devices I have? A Wacom table tablet is an Intuos 5M. I think I don't have it set up here, but it works out of the box actually. Even when it says not set up, you can even do like pressure sensitivity and stuff. It just works. It works on Chrome, GIMP, for example. I use GIMP. I'm using GIMP 2.10 nowadays. The latest, I use the one from the repository, the under development one. I find it very stable, so I'm pretty happy. And yeah, I usually use only one screen, one monitor, which is a Dell also, and Dell 2717D. It's a Quad HD, so it's 2540 by 1440, and I'm yeah, really like it, pretty happy with it. It has a version that is with an arm. Maybe if I would have to buy it today, I would buy it the same because I like it, but with the arm, you know, so you can clamp it on your desk. Besides that, pretty happy with that, and is the right size. I think it's a Quad HD and it still has a 27-inch, so you have a lot of things in the screen. So yeah, this is pretty much my computer. On the hard drive side, I have a 512, I think I mentioned. When I bought it, it came with Windows, and let's see. When I bought it, I bought the computer, it came with Windows, so I left that partition there, like the install. I just made it smaller, and then I made a bigger one to share, because I'm using Ubuntu or Linux since version 6, so that is already 12 years. And I wanted to see, like, hey, since this computer is new and has a new Windows 10, I want to use it just to see what kind of games am I missing, or what kind of apps are out there, you know. Just feel like a bit old. And for some reason it was crashing. It's a new laptop, a Dell laptop with a Dell screen, and it was crashing on when I plugged in the screen. So I stopped using Windows, but I just left the partition as NTFS, as mainly just to share files if I ever go back to Windows. And I tried a few other times over the years, the last 2 years, to boot into Windows, but I still had that issue. And I might remove it at some point, but actually having an NTFS partition on Linux used to be an issue. I remember it being like, oh no, you should do it because it's slow, or because it can. I really can't tell the difference nowadays with an SSD. You can't really tell the difference. At least I can't really. I use it for moving things all over for storage, and I don't see any difference. Like, you can't really tell. At least I can't. If it was something else. Then I keep these two. Then I made another partition recently, a small one, and I even left some megabytes free by mistake. But I made a small partition, 15 gigs, where I'm testing and playing with Fedora, which is another distribution. It's a completely different, well, it also uses GNOME as a desktop environment, but it's completely different, as in Ubuntu is based on Debian and is RPM, so it's completely like more like Red Hat-ish. But it's I just wanted to play, so that's a cool thing. You can just make a new partition, install it there. I am sharing my swap, so the memory, they use the same, so I don't have to make another one. And I'm also sharing the home folder, just I'm making a different user so they don't collapse, they don't collide. But really, it's so simple. Just make a partition for the hardware. It's even very small. It's only using 6 gigs, and I installed pretty much all I need there. So pretty happy with that. Besides, this is how I have it. I think I learned how to do this. A lot of people actually make tons of partitions for temp, for user stuff. With this, I'm more than happy, because home is where I keep some of my stuff that I use every day. Then the big partition is the one that I keep most of my data for longer term stuff. And then I know that if something goes wrong with the system, I can just wipe this partition with the one with the Ubuntu or the one with Fedora. I can just wipe it, and install it again. Even the one from Windows, I can just remove it and make a new one and install it from scratch, but my data, my home data, is untouched. So that setup is more than enough for the things that I do, which is mainly Blender. I compile Blender here myself. I use just the regular script from Blender to compile it. It's a Blender source. From there you can compile it. I'm not gonna teach how to compile there, but from build environments, basically you just install depths, and then it will install all the dependencies that you need, most of the dependencies, and then at the end it will give you a command, which is this one. It saves to a file, and then you just run this and it just compiles Blender. I compile a few other softwares. I use Qt Creator sometimes for more hardcore development going on, but for like actually, because this is very nice to jump between functions and everything, and I quite like that actually. This is where I spend most of my time trying to mess with Blender's code. Then for other stuff, I use Sublime for other kind of coding. For like Python stuff, I use Sublime. I know it's not open source. They're better, like there's Atom, for example, but I'm used to it. So for the time being, keep using it. I love open source. I think, yeah, you can tell. But sometimes I just use whatever is handy or whatever. I get used to it. So I think that's pretty much it. I asked on Twitter what you guys wanted to know about my setup. So let's go through the questions. This one was the first. Tell us your PC specs. I already mentioned it's an i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 1050. Oh, I wish 1080. 1050 GTX NVIDIA. Then Manu asks, I remember it was Ubuntu GNOME that you used. Yes, that is Ubuntu GNOME. And as I mentioned before. And then why don't you use the basic Ubuntu now that they cancel Unity? Well, because I usually, like, the latest version is the one we do with Ubuntu, like with GNOME by default. And it came out in April. So I like to wait a bit before installing new stuff, because I compile things and when things are working, I don't really want to do a lot. I like Blender. I have it running. I compile it. I even open it with you probably noticed that I don't have a shortcut down here to open Blender. I use a shortcut. I assigned a shortcut to open Blender. Assigning shortcuts is very simple from the keyboard settings on Ubuntu GNOME, on GNOME in general. And for example, I assign a shortcut, which is blatest. It's the same link that I made, -p, which allows you to give input for like the position of the window and how big the window you want to be. And I forced this window to be 1020 wide because I make live streams using OBS, basically. So yeah, this is me. It's me. Besides that, I use shortcuts for most of the things. I think I got used from using Blender. Next question. Tell us about the issues you face in any dedicated GPU drivers. I haven't had any issues. I had a few with, at least with Ubuntu. I am trying now Fedora, and the dual graphics card on my laptop is having a bit of issues because you have to install another driver, the Bumblebee, and I've never done that, so I haven't. I still have to play with it. But then Ubuntu is just use it just by default. For some reason, it works pretty well. Then also, I love how you drag your window. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. By default, I think it's Alt, the Alt key in the Linux distributions, in the most common ones. But I changed it to Super, or the Windows key, or the Command key, and then it's better because then it's less likely that other apps are gonna use it. In this case, Blender uses the Alt key a lot, so I don't. That's why I changed it in the first place, and actually I got really used to it. Then Nestor asks, I was wondering what kind of setup should I have to run for all Blender features to the max. I think nowadays you can use anything, really, anything that just works. The any laptop that already comes set up with like a nice NVIDIA graphics card should be fine. On Linux, back in the days, at least time ago, NVIDIA was leading with the proprietary drivers. They have nice. They were not open source. They're not open source, but they're good drivers. I think they're pretty. They work pretty well. So but now I think AMD is also on par. So next question. I will keep it a secret. No secret. Let's share the stuff you use. Transmithes says, are you able to use mouse software in your distro? Well, not a fancy one. For example, I'm using the MX Performance mouse, which is a oldish. It has already a few years, and it's very basic. It has just 2 buttons on the side that is for like going left and like going back and forth on the browser usually, and yeah, and then you can just change the lock. But for this, because it's wireless and it has a MX receiver, I use an app that is called Solar with double A, and it's great for managing your wireless devices from Logitech. So in this case, I have a performance mouse. I also use the MX Master at some point on this computer, and also I use a Logitech Solar keyboard even, and it was showing up here. So it's pretty nice. I use it mainly to keep track of the battery of my mouse. You don't need it for it to work. It works without, but with this app, you can see the battery. Besides, it also has a light on the side, but you don't really. Having software for it is very nice. But I don't know if they will allow, if it had more buttons, if it will allow me to change it. But there are ways. Just Google it. It might involve a bit of a terminal, but there are ways of doing it. You can't just not use Linux because of that. There are so many other reasons to use it. Mitch, the Mantisa says, Debian and Arch? No, actually, I use Ubuntu and Arch. But it's based on Debian, so pretty much the same. And then on a phone, so can't link, but you can configure your mice in Linux. Yes, they're talking to each other. I would say it's not the same pure GNOME experience. Oh, with this one. Well, I bet it's not the most pure Debian Ubuntu GNOME experience, but it's just a matter of tweaking it however you want it. And also you can install any desktop environment you want. Maybe you can even install the more pure GNOME if you want. But I think if you want the real pure stuff, you have to install Fedora, because they are more like bleeding edge on everything, and they have usually the latest GNOME version. I think this one is 6.26, and yeah, there is a few new ones. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I covered everything. I think I covered the Wacom, the screens, the hardware, the software that I use, pretty much everything. So let me know if I'm missing anything. It's been a fun video to make. I think I had to do it for so long. So many questions asking the same. This is what I use, and it hasn't changed for a while. I've been using it for 12 years, and it's just a few tweaks here and there, but I'm pretty happy with the setup. I wouldn't change it at all. All the apps that I need are here. Like for music, I use Spotify. For videos, you have Netflix and like on the browser. For anything really, like GIMP, I don't use any Adobe products, but I know like there is Substance Painter for it. There is Maya if you use it. There for Linux if you use it. There are lots of apps. There are lots of games even with it. I was playing with City Skyline, or Tropico even was also for Linux. I was playing with that. I like building cities and stuff. That is all for this video. I hope you like this recap. This is August 2018, so there might be an update soonish when I upgrade. Maybe if I move to Fedora, who knows? We'll make an update. But for time being, take care, and I will see you again in the next video. Ciao.